My doctor looked at me across that little desk. You know the kind, the one with the paper that crinkles every time you move. And he said, "Annie, for your age, everything looks fine." For your age. I was 63 years old. I had raised 6 children. I had worked double shifts in a factory for years so my family wouldn't feel the cold of what we didn't have. I had buried a husband. And this man, young enough to be my son, looked at me like I was some kind of miracle just for still being upright. For your age. Like the bar had been quietly lowered while I wasn't looking. My name is Annie. I'm 81 years old. And I want to talk to you about something nobody prepared me for. Not the doctors. Not my mother, God rest her. Not any woman I knew. What happens to your body after 60? Not the general things. The real things. The things that happen quietly while you're still thinking of yourself the way you always have. I was 59 when I first noticed my sleep changing. I'd gone to bed at my usual time. It was winter, cold enough that I kept an extra blanket folded at the foot of the bed, the one with the faded blue squares that I've had so long I don't remember where it came from. I fell asleep without trouble, and then I was awake, wide awake. It wasn't 3 in the morning. It was 11:15 at night. I'd slept maybe 2 hours. I lay there in the dark, listening to the refrigerator hum and thought, well, that's strange. And I went back to sleep eventually. But it kept happening. Not every night at first. Then most nights. Then every night without fail. Wake at midnight. Lie there. Fall back somewhere around 2. Wake again at 4. By morning, I felt like I'd spent the night arguing with someone instead of resting. I mentioned it to my doctor at my next visit. He said, that's normal for women your age. Your sleep patterns shift. I said, what do I do about it? He said, try to maintain a consistent bedtime. I sat with that advice for a moment. A consistent bedtime. I had maintained a consistent bedtime for 40 years. What I needed was a consistent sleep. Those are not the same thing. But I thanked him and left and went home and tried harder. I moved my bedtime earlier to 9 o'clock. I drank warm milk the way my mother used to make for us when we were small. She'd heat it on the stove, not in the microwave, said it tasted different, and she was right. I bought one of those white noise machines my youngest kept talking about. For about a week, it seemed to help. Then my body adjusted to the new schedule and started waking me at 10:30 instead of midnight. Like it had just shifted the whole problem 2 hours earlier and called it done. My grandchildren thought this was hilarious, by the way, that I was going to bed before their evening television shows started. I told one of them once that when you get to be my age, sleep stops being something that happens to you and starts being something you have to negotiate with. She looked at me like I'd said something in another language. I tried everything that first year. I cut out coffee afternoon, though I want you to understand that was a genuine sacrifice. I have been drinking coffee since I was 17 years old, and asking me to stop at noon is like asking someone to turn off the radio in the middle of a song. Possible, technically, but unpleasant. I tried keeping the bedroom colder, the way some article I read suggested. I spent 2 weeks sleeping in what felt like a refrigerator, waking up at 4 in the morning to pull the blanket I'd kicked off back over myself. I tried not looking at my telephone before bed. I tried reading. I tried not reading. I tried a cup of herbal tea that smelled like someone had boiled a garden. Nothing fixed it. The sleep stayed broken. And meanwhile, something else had started happening. Something I didn't connect to the sleep for a long time. I was cold. Constantly, in ways I couldn't explain. I've lived in the same house for decades. I know every draft, every corner where the air comes through in winter. But this was different. I'd be sitting in my kitchen in the middle of summer with the window closed and feel a chill move through me that had nothing to do with the temperature in the room. And then other days I'd be outside on what my neighbor described as a mild, pleasant afternoon. And I'd feel the heat like a weight pressing down on me. Dizzy, slow, like my body couldn't find where it was supposed to be. I went back to the doctor. He said, menopause changes how women regulate temperature. Your thermostat, so to speak, becomes less reliable. So what do I do? Stay hydrated, dress in layers. I drove home thinking about that. Dress in layers. I had raised children through 2 decades of southern summers. I knew how to dress. What I needed was to understand why my body had stopped knowing what season it was. But I bought some lighter cardigans. I put a thermometer in the kitchen. I started carrying a small bottle of water with me, even to walk to the mailbox, which felt faintly ridiculous at first. My father would have thought it the silliest thing he'd ever seen, but I did it. Now here is something I have to tell you, because if I don't say it, you'll think everything about this age is miserable. It isn't. There is something genuinely funny about standing in your own kitchen in July, wearing a cardigan and drinking hot coffee, which you were not supposed to be drinking past noon, but here you are, while your daughter is across town in shorts, complaining about the heat. She calls to check on me. "You keeping cool, Mama?" And I say, "I'm wearing a sweater." And there is a silence on the phone that tells me she has decided not to say anything about that. This is what 81 years gets you. The right to be cold in July without explaining yourself to anybody. The third thing happened slowly enough that I almost missed it. My digestion had always been something I took for granted, the way you take for granted any system that runs quietly in the background without demanding attention. I ate what I wanted. My body processed it. That was the arrangement. After 60, the arrangement changed. First, it was just that certain foods I'd eaten my whole life started sitting heavy. Things that had never given me a moment's trouble. I had a cast iron stomach, people used to say. Cast iron doesn't rust. Apparently it does. By 65, I had learned the hard way that a large meal in the evening meant being awake at 2 in the morning with a kind of discomfort that is too familiar and too undignified to describe in detail. I'd eaten the same way for 50 years. My body had simply decided, without consulting me, that it was done with those arrangements. I went back to the doctor a third time. He explained that after 60, the digestive system slows. The muscles involved in moving food through you lose strength and coordination. Stomach acid decreases. The small intestine becomes less efficient at absorbing what you need from your food. I said, "So what do I do?" He said, "Smaller meals, more frequently. Be careful with high-fat foods." I thought about my mother, who had eaten 3 full meals a day until the week she died, and never once thought about any of this. But then I thought, she didn't talk about her body much. None of the women I grew up around did. You handled what needed handling and you didn't broadcast it. Maybe she was managing things I never knew about. I started eating differently. Smaller portions spread across the day. More of the foods that helped. Yogurt in the morning, cooked vegetables instead of raw. Less of what I'd always loved without consequence. It helped. Not all at once, but gradually. What nobody told me was that this would also affect how I absorbed the things I needed. Vitamins I'd eaten my whole life were suddenly not being taken up the way they should. My B12 came back low at a checkup. Then my iron. Then my vitamin D, which the doctor told me affects muscle function directly, and which apparently most women over 70 are deficient in without knowing it. I had been walking around tired for 2 years and thinking it was just age. Some of it was. But some of it was something that could be addressed. That word, tired, leads me to what I think was the most frightening thing, because it didn't feel frightening at first. It just felt like getting older. My balance started changing around 67. It was subtle. I'd reach for something on a high shelf and feel an unfamiliar uncertainty in my feet. A half second of not being quite sure where the floor was. I'd get up from a chair too fast and have to stand still for a moment while the room settled. I started holding the handrail on stairs when I'd never given stairs a second thought. I didn't say anything to anyone. I thought I was being sensible, paying more attention. That I'd always been slightly careless, and now I was simply correcting that. Then one morning I got up from my chair to answer the phone. Just stood up, turned around, took 2 steps, and the floor came up to meet me. I didn't fall badly. I caught myself on the arm of the chair, went down more of a controlled slide than a true fall. Nothing broke. But I sat there on the floor for a moment before getting up, my heart going fast, and I thought, that has never happened before in my life. I was 68. The doctor explained it in a way that made me feel the specific weight of what was changing. 3 systems work together to keep you upright, he said. Your inner ear, the sensors in your muscles and joints that tell your brain where your body is without you having to look. And your vision, particularly your ability to judge depth and distance and the edges of things. After 60, all 3 systems weaken. And what's more, the part of your brain that processes the signals from those systems and coordinates a response slows down. So even when something begins to go wrong, your body's reaction time is slower than it used to be. He said falls were the #1 cause of serious injury in older adults. That a broken hip at my age carried a genuinely frightening set of consequences. That the fear of falling itself, once it took hold, actually made falling more likely because you moved differently, more tensely, and that tension disrupted the natural fluid movement that kept you steady. I said, so what do I do? He said, be careful. I stared at him. Be careful. I had been careful. I had been careful my whole life. I had been careful with money and children and other people's feelings and things that were fragile. Careful was not new information. What I needed was something I could actually do. I found it eventually, but not from him. There was a community center not far from me. I'd driven past it for years without ever going in. One of Denise's friends mentioned they had a morning class there. Balance and movement, she called it, something between exercise and whatever the word is for standing on one foot while turning your head. I thought, that sounds like something children do. I did not say this out loud, but I had fallen. And I did not want to fall again. So I went. The first morning I felt enormous walking in there. Not in size, in self-consciousness. There were women older than me and younger than me, and all of us standing in a circle in a church basement kind of room, following an instructor who moved slowly enough that I could actually follow her. I stayed, not every week at first, then most weeks. Then I stopped thinking about whether I was going. What it did for my balance, I can't fully explain. But the specific moment I noticed it, I was walking out to get my mail and the ground was uneven. One of those frost-heaved sections of sidewalk that has been uneven for years, and I had always stepped around carefully. Without thinking, I walked straight over it. I stopped on the other side and looked back. I had not thought about it. My feet had made the adjustment before my brain had finished noticing there was something to adjust to. That was a 1.5 years after I'd started going to that class. But the thing underneath all of this, the thing that explained the tiredness, the slow recovery, the way stairs had started to cost me something, was muscle. This is what no one had explained to me, and what, when I finally understood it, made sense of the previous 15 years of things I'd noticed and attributed to simply getting older. After 60, the body begins losing muscle in a way that is not casual. Scientists call it something I can't pronounce correctly on a good day, but what it means in plain terms is this. Your body stops rebuilding muscle the way it used to. The fibers that allow you to stand up quickly, to catch yourself, to carry something upstairs, those are the ones that go first. And they go faster than the rest. My doctor's assistant, a younger woman who somehow always made me feel she'd actually considered what she was going to say before saying it, explained it to me at a checkup when I was 74. She said the body after 70 needs significantly more protein than it ever did in younger years because something called anabolic resistance means you need to give it much more to get the same result. She said most older women are eating far less protein than they need. She said this loss of muscle was connected directly to falls, to fatigue, to the feeling of diminishment that so many women her patient's age described but could never quite name. What does your diet look like? She asked. I thought about it honestly. I had been eating less as I got older, partly because my appetite had decreased, partly because cooking for one didn't inspire the way cooking for 6 once had. A piece of toast in the morning, something small at lunch. She didn't say anything dramatic. She just explained simply what I needed more of and why. I started paying attention to protein the way I'd once paid attention to the grocery budget, seriously, specifically, without letting myself get vague about it. Eggs in the morning, something substantial at lunch, less of the filler foods I'd been reaching for without thinking. I want to be careful here. I'm not going to tell you what to eat. I'm 81 years old, and I've learned that the moment you start telling people what to put in their mouths, they stop listening to everything else you were going to say. What I'll tell you is what I noticed. The tiredness didn't disappear, but it changed. It went from being a constant low ceiling I lived under to being something that came after actual effort, the way tiredness is supposed to work. I had energy in the morning that I hadn't had in years. Not dramatic energy, just the ordinary kind. Enough to do what I meant to do before I needed to sit down. I am 81 now, and I understand things about this body that I did not understand at 60. Not because anyone explained them to me all at once. They didn't. I gathered them the way you gather anything over time. Slowly, from many different directions, often only understanding what a piece meant after I'd had it for a while. The sleep will change. Yours already has, or it will. Not because something is wrong. Because the brain that has been running that particular system for 60 or 70 years is running it differently now. Fighting it, I found, only made things worse. Learning to stop apologizing for going to bed when I was tired, for waking when I woke, for letting the night be what it was rather than what I thought it should be. That was its own kind of relief. The temperature thing. You will stand in a room and feel cold while everyone around you is comfortable, and you will wonder if you're imagining it. You're not. The system that regulated your body's relationship to heat and cold has genuinely changed. I have a thermometer in my kitchen now. I trust it more than I trust what my body reports. The digestion, the balance, the muscle. None of this is failure. That's what I want to say. And I want to say it plainly because I spent a long time receiving this information and hearing it as evidence that something had gone wrong with me. Nothing went wrong. The body that carried me through 81 years of living is still working, still adjusting, still doing what it can with what it has. What shifted for me was when I stopped treating the changes as problems to be solved and started treating them as conditions to be understood. My father used to say when something wasn't working the way he expected, all right, what's actually in front of me? Not what he wanted to be there. Not what had been there before. What was actually there right now that he had to work with? He was talking about a car engine usually, or a section of fence that wouldn't cooperate. But I find myself saying it about my body now, at 81. All right, what's actually in front of me? And mostly, what's in front of me is a life I'm still glad to be living. Seasons still moving through. The smell of coffee in the morning, which I have refused to surrender entirely, and I'm not sure any doctor could make me. Small things. Kayla sitting at my kitchen table doing her homework in comfortable silence. The particular quality of afternoon light in autumn when it comes through the window at that angle that only happens for about 2 weeks a year. I have watched a lot of sunrises in 81 years, more than I counted. I expect I'll see a few more. The body changes. The women I grew up around, my mother, her sisters, the women from church, they moved through these changes without names for them, without anyone explaining what was happening or why. They just kept going. I used to think that was strength. Now I think it was also a kind of unnecessary loneliness. There was no reason they had to navigate all of that without understanding. You don't have to either. If you've been sitting here with me through all of this, thank you. I mean that in the way you mean it, when someone has actually given you their time, which is the thing you can't replace and can't get back. If you want to keep sitting here sometimes, I'll be around. There's always something else to talk about, and I find I like the company more than I used to admit. Take care of yourself, whatever that means to you.